Hello EFD squad and welcome back to the return of Transfer Review, which can only mean one thing. The PVC chairs are back.
The terrible chairs.
PVS, how do you like the PVC?
I hate them.
These were our first purchase, our first acquisition when we got, £50 budget.
It makes me feel like I'm in Boys to Men. It's dreadful.
Talking of dreadful, we've got rid of the transfer shocker, okay? It's a whole new makeup on a new look transfer review. So we're doing 3 headliners from across the continent, of course, emphasis on European football. And then we're bringing our own candidate to the table, aren't we, that we maybe feel is a little bit underrepresented in the mainstream media. Starting, though, with someone who is pretty much in every headline. It's Joao Felix. Where's he going? What's he doing? Is he worth it?
Well, he's been linked with a move to Manchester, and this week it's Man United who are apparently ahead in the race, with Benfica president Luis Felipe Vieira conceding that Felix could leave. Now, he said Felix had a release clause of 60 million euros after a couple of games. We realised we must increase it to 120 million euros.
Brazen.
And he's also admitted that the only way they could actually keep him, if somebody were to come in with a big bid, would be to try and secure him on a loan back next season. Now, while Felix does seem to be very happy in Portugal, he said, "I'm good here, I'm happy, I love the club, I adore the fans, they adore me, blah, blah, blah." It does seem like he's very quickly outgrowing the Portuguese league. In his debut campaign, 15 goals, 7 assists in the league, and 3 goals, 1 assist in 6 Europa League games. He was 3rd for league goals in the Benfica squad, 4th for assists, despite only playing 1,700 minutes, which actually ranks 8th in the squad. So really good goal contribution to minutes ratio relative to other top players in that league. Now, Man United, Man City, as I said, are interested. Juventus have also been linked, apparently at the behest of Cristiano Ronaldo, and Real Madrid, of course, who seem to be chasing every star player this summer, are interested too. But what do we think about this overall? Like, what's a little bit of background? Is there more than just these top line numbers to make us think he's worth it?
There's not a huge sample size, is there? Because he wasn't really a regular in the Benfica side until January, only starting 4 games up until that point, completing a 90 once, which kind of sounds similar to my record. However, then Rui Vitória sacked on the 2nd of January after a defeat away to Portimonense, leaving the side 4th, 7 points behind Porto at that time, which is not good enough as a Benfica manager, is it? Benfica boss Bruno Lage took over, so former assistant to Carlos Carvalhal at Sheffield Wednesday and Swansea, so well travelled at this point, and they won 18 of their remaining 19 games, which feels like a good bounce back. Scoring 72 goals in the process, which is 3.8 per game, finishing champions by 2 clear points. So quite a renaissance in the second half of the season, thanks to Lage. And Joao Felix was a massive part of that. And obviously his knowledge of the reserve side, of the club's youth structure, are paying dividends here. So Joao Felix, up until that point, 2 goals and 1 assist in 12 games. Post Lage, 17 goals and 7 assists in 30 games. Liga NOS stats then, 3.5 shots per 90, pretty bloody healthy for a man in his position. 2.4 from inside the box, even more so. So really adept at finding space in the penalty area. 1.5 key passes, a solid 0.9 dribbles. So an intimation of what kind of player he is there, someone that really prospers in the final third. But 7 players in the division have taken more shots and 42 players have provided more key passes, so worth bearing that in mind before we label him as, the next Messi, let's say. Pretty impressive for a 19-year-old though, nonetheless, and it's going to take a fair wedge to prize him from the club, like you said, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently 120 mil, I'm not sure that I'd pay that even for a 19-year-old with these sorts of numbers. To be honest, I would like to see more dribbling. Like, I know that his shot numbers are good and his key passes are pretty good if he were a centre forward. But if you're going to play him as an attacking midfielder or off the wing, I do struggle that when he comes up against defenders in a tougher league, if he's not already completing a lot of dribbles in Portugal, I doubt that that's going to improve when he's facing, really top quality defenders, which is what you get in the top 5 leagues. So the Guardian say that Manchester clubs are both interested, and obviously Benfica will be delighted if they can play them off against one another, but I imagine it would require a big outgoing for one of them to make the leap. Maybe Man City would have to let Gabi Jesus go, because I'm not sure that the Leroy Sané, Joao Felix switcheroo really, really works. And Romelu Lukaku could potentially leave, and maybe then Rashford could go to centre forward and Felix could play off the right. So we could potentially see that. But actually Juventus, I think, might be the place to go for this. Ronaldo, 34, Mandzukic, 33, Dybala could yet leave. I mean, he seems like he solves a lot of problems. Like, you could play him in a bunch of different positions, and because they get so much ball progression out of those really outstanding wing backs, you maybe don't need him to take on people so much out in the wide areas. But what do you guys think? Where would you like to see him go, and is he worth the money? Let us know in the comments below. Next up, we take a trip to Florence to look at Jordan Veretout, who could be on his way to Napoli, or Roma, or Arsenal.
Interesting. We've liked his numbers for a little while, haven't we? He's really rebuilt his career following that underwhelming spell at Aston Villa, although that was probably more of an indication of the club as a whole, as opposed to Jordan Vertout's skill set. But Napoli seemed like they had this one wrapped up in advanced talks with the 26-year-old, but L'Equipe claim that Arsenal have entered the race at the 11th hour. Now, the potential spanner in the works is, according to Football Italia, Sevilla and Roma are also interested in busting this move wide open, with the Giallorossi's new boss Paulo Fonseca supposedly viewing him as a much more viable option than former target Donny van der Beek, who's been linked with Manchester United as of this morning. Like we said, Veretout does have experience in the Premier League, which will put him in good stead for a move to one of these top clubs. You know, no disrespect to Fiorentina. He made 25 appearances in the Premier League before joining St Etienne on loan, and then Fiorentina permanently for around €7 million in July 2017. And he's kind of in the fulcrum of that midfield for a while, doing a little bit of everything. So he impressed more so in the 17-18 season, when Fiorentina were more impressive as a unit, scoring 8 and assisting 1 in 36 league games. Only Giovanni Simeone scored more with 14. And although they've struggled this year, relegation was still a potential scenario on the final game week, wasn't it, with Empoli winning 3 on the bounce prior to that. Veretout still played very well. So only 4 players, which is Baraghi, Chiesa, Lafont, I believe, Milenkovic, played more than his 3,038 league minutes. So a real mainstay in that side, and they were heavily reliant on him throughout the season, and very useful contributing on the attacking end as well as just sort of doing his normal midfield duties.
Yeah, despite playing in that deep role, he was involved in 5 goals and 3 assists this season. So that's about 17% of Fiorentina's goal output. But he doesn't shirk his defensive duties. 3.4 tackles and interceptions per 90, 55 passes a game, and 3.9 completed long balls, which is very good for a central midfielder. 2.4 key passes per 90. That's the best in Fiorentina's squad, and actually would rank the 10th if he were playing in the Premier League. Obviously, they tend to be boosted by taking set pieces, for instance, but still very, very solid. And XG actually suggests that his 3 assists should have been closer to 6. So that's 0.4 expected goals and assists per 90, which is absolutely obscene for somebody playing in the centre of the park. Now, the downside is that he completes less than 82% of his passes. But that's probably because of all his attempted long balls. It's probably because of set pieces.
Fiorentina as well, probably playing a little bit more pragmatically, eh?
Well, also, if you see somebody with big key pass numbers, it's extremely rare to see that person with a high pass accuracy, just because they're attempting killer balls all the time. But yeah, Veretout seems like he can do it all in the centre of the park. What do you think about him as an Arsenal target?
Well, it sort of depends, doesn't it? Because you've been linked with Dennis Pret, the 25-year-old midfielder from Sampdoria as well. I think Jordan Veretout probably suits your needs more so, but he would cost significantly more. And I don't know how much money Arsenal have to play with. Seemingly no one does in the press. So I think Veretout would cost around £35 million if you were to believe reports, whereas Pret would come as part of a double deal, a £40 million double deal that would include Anderson as well. I think he'd be great for Napoli, but Napoli already have Zielinski, they already have Allen, who can of course do everything. He's a Eurofootball Daily favourite. Fabian Ruiz, who contributes really nicely on the attacking end, and Diawara, who was still waiting to break through and put up some meaningful minutes, right? So Diawara is 4 years younger than Veretout and only played 660 Serie A minutes last season, but still put up 3.1 tackles in interceptions, a 93% pass accuracy, 1.4 shots, 1.2 dribbles, 0.7 key passes, which is okay from the base of midfield. I would sound out his development as more of a priority than bringing in someone like Veretout.
Or if Napoli do get Veretout, then I would go to Napoli and try and take Diawara off them, which actually Arsenal and Spurs have been linked with. A €20 million move for Diawara, which would be a bargain.
Bingo,
I think.
the domino effect. So keep your eyes on how that sort of manifests. Saying that, Roma are probably the standout club in terms of needing a player of his profile, aren't they? So they lost De Rossi, of course. He played over 1,500 League and Champions League minutes in 18-19, so still contributing massively despite being, 34, 35, and Zonzi is 30 now. And I think he'd dovetail really nicely with Cristante and Pellegrini. Pellegrini is, of course, pretty much in charge of their whole progression game. Cristante puts up really sound defensive numbers, really good passing numbers, is kind of a bit of a conductor in the centre of midfield. So the two would sit alongside those pair pretty nicely. But Serie A fans, where would you like to see him go? Let us know in the comments below. Let's move on to our final transfer before we each bring one to the tableau. Final transfer then, Marco Asensio to Inter Milan, and this would be quite the marquee signing for the Nerazzurri, right?
Yes, Antonio Conte apparently wants a statement signing when he arrives this summer, and 23-year-old Real Madrid attacker Marco Asensio is catching his eye. Now, obviously, they're expected to splash the cash. Eriksen, Lukaku, Xhaka and Kovacic all linked with a move to the San Siro over the last few weeks, but according to Corriere dello Sport, Asensio has emerged as a feasible target despite having a contract running till 2023 and a €700 million buyout clause in his contract. Now, this would be some coup, I think. Los Blancos apparently might be willing to let him leave. He didn't have a particularly good 18-19 campaign, contributed 3 goals, 4 assists in about 2,000 League and Champions League minutes, which isn't really what you want, even though Real Madrid obviously had a bad attacking campaign all round. That's still not really great. Now, he's been at the club since December 2014. He's actually very experienced. He's made over 35 appearances in the last 5 seasons. He's got 242 career games under his belt, which is actually more than Leroy Sané on 190, despite Sané being 10 days older. And having been involved in 12 league goals in the 17-18 campaign, he was involved in 5 this season, despite playing roughly the same number of minutes. So at 23, that's normally when you expect a young attacker to sort of make the leap, to go from being talented and a prospect to being a star. And Asensio doesn't look like that's happening.
Yeah, and it's a well-trodden path, isn't it? Inter Milan picking up disenfranchised Galacticos. They did it with Luis Figo, they did it with Walter Samuel, Esteban Cambiasso. So he might well think about making the move to further his career because, like you said, very good player, but we've kind of been expecting more. We've expected him to evolve, and it's not quite happened yet, despite very healthy underlying numbers. So 2.3 shots per game, which is 4th in the squad, 1.6 key passes, 2.1 dribbles, which is again 4th in the squad, an expected goals and assist contribution of 0.5 per 90. Expected goals actually thinks he was a little bit unlucky this season not to have had 4 goals and 5 assists, which would have boosted his numbers significantly. And with Jovic and Hazard coming in and Bale seemingly impossible to move on, do you stick around as Asensio to kind of become a bit part player when you can make more of a contribution, when these numbers suggest you should be having more of a prolific season? I'm not sure. Maybe a loan would be good for him at this point. I'm not quite sure if that would be on Real Madrid's sort of at the forefront of their mind. They'd probably want to keep him, wouldn't they? It's probably going to be one of those scenarios where it's slightly unfair to the progression of the player's career, but good for the club to retain a man of his quality. Now, those sort of numbers that we discussed prior are the same numbers that he put up in the 2015-16 season when he scored 4 and assisted 10 Espanyol, which again kind of goes back to what we're saying. Still a good player, but everyone was expecting his numbers to be up here, and it's not quite materialised. He did miss 1 month of the season, in the season just gone by, with a quad injury, so we do have to take that into consideration, and struggled for minutes when he came back from said injury. Would he be a good fit at Inter? I would say so. Played the majority of his football this season on the left, but can play on the right too. Probably preferable on the right. And the left wing for Inter is, of course, Ivan Perisic, who has put up very good numbers in the past, has drummed up interest from the likes of Manchester United for 30, 40 million pounds, but it's becoming an increasingly likely scenario that Inter Milan are willing to part with his services, although I do think a guy of his industry would fit in well into a Conte's system. So, I mean, if you can get Asensio in for Perisic, that's definitely an upgrade for me. No real prolific assisters in the Inter Milan squad either, so no one provided more than 6, and that was Politano. Only Icardi and Perisic scored over 6 league goals as well, so they definitely need to strengthen that final third, don't they? Like we said, the move's looking unlikely. Zidane said, I have spoken to him and told him that it would be fundamental to the team. Very strong language from Zinedine. And I want him back here with us. And there'll be a few people that maybe fell out of favour under Lopetegui, under Solari, that will feel like it's worth sticking around now. Zidane is back. People like Isco, people like Asensio. But it's still a bit messy at Real Madrid, isn't it? Now, would you keep hold of Asensio, Los Blancos fans, or would you cash in on him now with him turning 24 next year? Let us know in the comments below. Moving on to our news section. So this is our brand new section, and in future weeks it's going to be fueled by you, the fans, so get your requests below. Basically, we've picked a player who's aroused us, statistically speaking, and someone that's not received an awful lot of coverage in the media. There might have been, you know, page 4 or 5, Pat, if you will. Although the sport does start from the back, doesn't it? So wrap your head around that one. Anyway, who are you bringing to the table?
I thought I'd talk a little bit about Adnan Januzaj, who got pretty limited minutes this season. He obviously had an injury at the beginning of the year, but he was coming off a really, really strong campaign last season, where he put up 0.75 expected goals and assists per 90 at the age of 23 in La Liga with Sociedad. So that looked like a kind of star-making campaign, but this injury, I think, probably nixed a move. Now, Leicester tried for him in January, apparently. 20 million euros they bid for him, and I think that was a really smart decision because I think he's superior to Demarai Gray in every conceivable way. Demarai Gray I don't think is very good at all, and when you look around that Leicester squad, to me, he's the odd one out in their attacking talent. So Januzaj this year, over 2 shots a game, two key passes. Last year, those numbers were actually even better. And more impressively, he's contributing 5 successful dribbles per 90 minutes, which is absolutely outrageous. By comparison, Demarai Gray is under 2 dribbles. He's under 1 key pass a match. His shots are from absolutely horrific locations. It's like he's never learned where the goal actually is. And Januzaj, even in a down year, 0.4 expected goals and assists per 90 minutes, which in a pretty poor side, having come back from injury, it's actually better than Pablo Fornals this season. I think Pablo Fornals still remains an absolutely top-class prospect. So I think you're getting somebody who can create, who can score, who can dribble, who's pretty fast, who's actually surprisingly big as well. He's over 6 foot tall, which I think in the wide areas is an underrated characteristic. So I think that if you are maybe a mid-table Premier League side who want to take a gamble on somebody with pretty good upside, then Januzaj, if he arrives and he's the player he is now, you're getting a decent contributor. If he arrives and he takes off the way it looks like he could, you could be getting an absolute superstar.
Yeah, you've been an advocate of his for a very long time.
Yeah, he's a quality player.
And he's had a little bit of a renaissance in Spain, hasn't he? It could be the long-term heir to Sharky Mark O'Brien on the wing for Leicester.
Be interesting.
Get him in. God, good delivery though on Mark.
I don't know. I think Mark O'Brien's a more useful player than Gray.
Yeah, I would say that as well, and I think every kind of respective manager that's been there would agree with you because he's claimed significantly more minutes than Demarai Gray. Anyway, on to my player. I wanted to profile someone totally new, someone I had no kind of knowledge about prior to last night when I was sort of doing half an hour's worth of research for this, and it's Nemanja Maksimovic. Now, there is a Nikola Maksimovic who is a centre-half for Napoli as well, which is why the name might sound familiar, but you might know As you might have noticed from the podcast, from previous Sunday Vibes, Getafe and Eibar's seasons have fascinated me. And of course, Getafe narrowly missed out on Champions League football in La Liga. Awful end to the season. Valencia finishing very strongly and pipping them to that 4th place. Now, Maksimovic is a defensive behemoth in the heart of that midfield. He's played the majority of his games in central midfield, some of them as an out-and-out defensive midfielder, but Bordalas kind of plays a very defensive, pragmatic style of play, so doesn't allow a lot of shots or high-quality opportunities on their goal. And this guy is key, central to that. Around 4.1 defensive actions, well, tackles, interceptions at the very least, from the heart of midfield. Quite good at striding forward as well, around 6'2", physically imposing character. Decent burst of speed on him, actually. That was an unexpected bonus when I was sort of watching highlights from him. Has quite an interesting story, came from Astana, so obviously not playing a great kind of quality of football before transitioning to Valencia, where he had a pretty lacklustre year. I think 15 appearances, only around 9 of them starts as well. But then a 10 million move to Getafe, like I said, has given him this new lease of life. And I identified one significant weakness, which was his passing. Only 21 passes per game with a pass accuracy of around 75%, I believe. Okay. But then you look at Getafe and they actually retained the least amount of possession in La Liga.
Oh, really?
On 43%.
I mean, that doesn't shock me.
Yeah, so it's very much a counter-attacking system that they've employed, a very deep block. And I think his options when he gets the ball are very limited. And I think he's better than those numbers suggest as well, because in 6 Nation League games for Serbia, when he played against teams such as Germany, Portugal and Ukraine, so there's a decent, level of quality in that group. He was averaging around 62 passes a game with an 83-84% pass accuracy. Okay. So more to come from him in that on that front. And it got me thinking, who needs a defensively minded passer that suits defensively minded systems and can be maybe a better passer than he's called upon at the moment. And I thought maybe he could fill in as a long-term heir or a stopgap for Atletico Madrid while they look for a Rodri replacement should he go to Manchester City. So maybe Diego Simeone will be like a moth to a flame when he sees his defensive numbers. But that was kind of a comparison, a correlation, a conclusion that I drew, Pato. So Maksimovic, keep your eyes peeled. There's a few Getafe players. We profiled one of the centre halves on Extra Time. I think he's been linked with Arsenal.
Oh, Jenny Depono.
Yeah. How do you pronounce his first name? Because it's D-J-E-N-E, isn't it?
Yeah, Jenny.
Jenny, silent D. We profiled him on the Extra Time podcast. Go and check that out if you're interested. Vote for which transfer your club could use out of these pair in the poll just above. And I think that's it for our first transfer review. Back on Euro Football Daily, of course, we'll be running. These will be running throughout the summer, even. Did you enjoy a new section? Let us know on Twitter and on Instagram. Pato, any other videos you'd like to flag before we depart?
Well, if you're interested in transfers, we've got transfer winners and losers. There's always transfer talk over on FD, and this week on the Sunday Vibes Extra Time podcast, we'll be taking a look at transfers that your club should avoid. So make sure that you download and listen to that, and of course, subscribe to the channel, like the video. Drop us comments, engage with us on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll see you next time.